In Beijing, an arrest warrant is issued for a leading dissident. In Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev prepares for an important trip.
This is NBC Nightly News, reported by Garrick Utley.
Good evening. It appears today that a major dispute is developing between China and the United States. It is over the fate of China's best-known advocate of democracy. Fang Lizhi and his wife were ordered arrested today by authorities in Beijing. They are currently living at the American embassy, which gave them refuge last week following the massacre in Tiananmen Square. So the stage is now set for a struggle between Beijing and Washington over a man, his wife, and what they stand for. Tom Brokaw is in Beijing. Tom, what is this going to mean now?
Garrick, it's very hard to say, but there's been no comment from the embassy so far on the Fang arrest warrant, but clearly this will only widen the gulf between the United States and China, for the arrest warrant is an open challenge to the Bush administration's decision to provide sanctuary for Fang and his wife. And today's announcement does raise a provocative question. Are the Chinese prepared now to go to the United States to get Fang? After all, they know where he is. That doesn't seem likely. But in recent days, the Chinese government has demonstrated it will go and do just about anything to strike down dissent. So tonight, a small bespectacled physicist is the latest symbol of the two Chinas in the deep division.
This is one of the busiest intersections in town, and you never know at first glance that this is a city under martial law. That just a week ago, less than a mile from here, one of the worst massacres in Beijing's history occurred. It is an astonishing change for these shoppers. Many of them likely participated in the demonstrations for democracy, demonstrations which came to such a tragic and bloody end. Now they try to put their lives back together under the guns of martial law. And China's state television has become one of the major weapons of martial law. Tonight's evening newscast was devoted almost entirely to scenes such as this. Suspects obviously beaten and charged with attacks on the army. They were described as hooligans and counter-revolutionaries. And a troubling development for journalists. When this man appeared in an ABC News report criticizing the Chinese government, the transmission was intercepted by China television. It was rebroadcast here. The man was described as a rumor monger. Chinese citizens were urged to turn him in. Tonight, he appeared on the evening newscast with two women who said they turned him in. He apologized for his, quote, counter-revolutionary behavior. What happens to him next, we don't know. At the same time, the army is attempting to repair its relationships with the people, broadcasting scenes of soldiers helping residents clean the streets, showing soldiers wounded when they were attacked in the hours leading up to and during the massacre in the square. But it will take a lot more than a few sympathetic television pictures to erase the memories of what the People's Liberation Army did to the people a week ago. There have been so many tragedies in Beijing in recent days, but tonight we can tell you a story with a happy ending. I'll have that later in the program. Now back to Garrick Utley in New York.
Tom, because of the arrests in China, we at NBC News in the future will try to protect the identities of any Chinese in our news reports who criticize authorities there. This, of course, because our news broadcast can be received by satellite in China, and that could endanger those who are still brave enough there to speak out. Well, also here on NBC Nightly News this evening, as we cover the world this Sunday, we will look south to Latin America. In many countries, such as Argentina, economic collapse is creating political upheaval and threatening the fragile attempts to build democracy. We will see what that could mean for us. And in Paris, we will see Michael Chang do it, become the first American man to win the French Open in 34 years, and the youngest ever. Not bad for a 17-year-old. Gorbachev in Germany. He arrives there tomorrow on a very important visit. West Germany is the key to the NATO alliance. 250,000 American servicemen and women are stationed there, but the Germans there want to do more business with the communist East, and they want to live in peace with it, and they think Mikhail Gorbachev is the key to that. So, as American officials look on with some trepidation, Gorbachev will spread his message and his charm. Here's Bob Abernathy in Bonn.
Barbed wire coming down in Eastern Europe. Soviet troops being pulled out of East Germany. democratic reforms inside the Soviet Union. All this plus his own personality make Mikhail Gorbachev the most popular foreign leader ever in West Germany. 90% of the people here say they trust him. Gorbachev and Chancellor Kohl met in Moscow last fall. Now Gorbachev comes here, eager for more ventures such as this German-financed shoe factory in Leningrad. The Soviets desperately need foreign help with their backward consumer economy. The U.S. wants Gorbachev to respond while he's in Germany to President Bush's recent troop reduction proposals, but Soviet officials doubt that he will.
We feel that what President Bush suggested was, in part, in great part, a response to our proposals.
Gorbachev and the West Germans will sign 11 financial, cultural, and educational agreements. But the most important part of the visit will be what is said and symbolized about the idea Gorbachev and many Germans call the common European home. As Gorbachev preaches it, military alliances would disappear and cooperation would replace confrontation from the Atlantic Ocean to the Ural Mountains. No one knows yet what the common home might mean for the Berlin Wall or divided Germany, but the broad idea has growing appeal among Germans. As West Germany's foreign minister described the possibility, there could be a Europe without separation, without an iron curtain, without a wall, and without barbed wire. Bob Abernethy, NBC News, Bonn.
Vice President Dan Quayle is off to Central America this evening. He'll visit 4 countries which have working democracies, but he will miss Nicaragua and Panama, which do not. And that brings us to our Sunday Journal. Democracy in Latin America is under threat. The threat of guerrilla wars in some countries, the threat of economic collapse in others. The result of all this is that democracy is getting a reputation as being, well, ineffective. Ed Rabel shows us now what's happening.
When he visits war-torn El Salvador, Vice President Quayle may see something of how democracy and freedom are threatened these days in Latin America. Communist-led rebels are increasing their attacks. The guerrillas provided these pictures of a recent assault in San Salvador. The far right won power at the polls this year, in large part because the middle-of-the-road party that was in power failed to achieve peace and prosperity. At the same time, experts believe economic problems are threatening emerging democracies throughout Latin America.
Right across the southern cone of Latin America, the economies are a major problem for all the governments.
Most of the governments of Latin America were military dictatorships until a wave of democracy promoted by America swept across the region in the past decade. Now, those democracies are in danger. It is in the great capitals like Buenos Aires that you can witness the economic crisis firsthand. Governments struggle to sustain their fragile democracies. At the same time, they are in serious trouble just trying to feed the people. Looters, many of them middle-class women and children, broke into grocery stores in Argentina this month for food because soaring inflation almost has wiped out the value of their currency, leaving them without the means to buy necessities. At least 15 people died in rioting.
The danger is that these governments will be overthrown by their own military, and we'll see a regression to the kind of brutal authoritarian military rule that dominated the region in the 1970s.
It could happen in Brazil, where bands of hungry people have robbed supermarkets. Prices in Brazil are now at least 14,000 times higher than they were in 1980. Angry civilians attacked banking houses in broad daylight. It could happen in Peru, whose economy is on the brink of collapse. Leftist demonstrators protesting price increases called for a communist-style takeover. President Alan Garcia, a social democrat elected overwhelmingly 4 years ago, has seen his approval rating plummet from 98% to 4%. After 31 years of uninterrupted democracy, it could happen in Venezuela, where more than 200 people were killed this year in riots, sparked in part because bus fares were hiked.
My reading of Latin America is that there is a very widespread thirst for democracy, that there would be popular resistance if it were to be suppressed by the military. And so I still think that democracy has a chance, but it's a chance, it's not a certainty.
At the heart of the crisis and the suffering, economists say, is the region's $420 billion foreign debt. Money to help the poor and rebuild the economies goes to a large extent to U.S. banks, just to pay off the interest, they say.
The United States is going to have to find a formula to ease the debt burden on the countries of the Southern Cone so that they can stop exporting capital to the United States and begin to grow out of their economic problems.
A U.S. government plan to forgive some of the debt so there can be reinvestment, the economists say, may be too little, too late. The democracies that emerged in Latin America in the past decade, they warn, already may be doomed. Ed Rabel, NBC News, Buenos Aires.
President-elect Carlos Menem of Argentina is scheduled to replace Raul Alfonsín in December, but officials there said today an agreement is being worked out for Menem to take power this summer. With the economy in Argentina in chaos, pressure has been growing for Alfonsín to step down sooner rather than later. Well, the television evangelist today said he plans to dissolve his moral majority movement, the conservative political lobby he formed 10 years ago. He said it is no longer needed because, quote, the religious right is solidly in place. Politics is personal, always has been, always will be. People vote for people they like. Politicians, however, try to tear down those they oppose, and it is getting worse. After last autumn's election, there was some hope that negative politics might be cured by a dose of the kinder, gentler medicine prescribed by George Bush, but it hasn't happened. Republicans cried foul when Democrats attacked John Tower for a fondness for women and drink. This past week, Democrats were furious over a personal attack by some Republicans against House Speaker Thomas Foley. On Kiker's Capitol today, Douglas Kiker looks at that incident, which President Bush called disgusting. It was also a sign of the times.
There is nothing in my personal life or background, financial or personal, which would reflect ill on the House or constitutes any misconduct on my part.
Representative Tom Foley, in an NBC News interview with correspondent Bob Kerr before he was elected as the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. This is the first time this interview has been broadcast.
Is there anything in your past that will rear up and come to interfere with what may be a clear path for you?
Absolutely not.
Nothing to be worried
Absolutely
about
not.
or ashamed of?
No, absolutely not.
As he spoke, Foley knew, as all of Washington knew, that a Republican attempt was underway to link him with homosexuality. A staff assistant of House Minority Whip Newton Gingrich, Karen Van Brocklin, already had been placing calls to Washington reporters attempting to do this. There were no takers. After Foley's election, Mark Gooden, communications director of the Republican National Committee, wrote and distributed a memo urging Foley to, quote, come out of the liberal closet. That infuriated Republicans and Democrats alike.
When you start to suggest, as they did in this RNC memo, that, well, let's see now, he's out of the liberal closet, might as well have underlined it, and then compare him with someone who was known to be, in this case, a homosexual, it doesn't take any genius, a rocket scientist to figure out what they had in mind.
It's dirty, it's filthy politics. It's not American, and the American people are revolted by it.
The president called me and wanted to know what the sense of feeling was up here, and I said, well, it's outrage.
Gooden quickly resigned. Gingrich condemned the memo and said his aide was only responding to reporters' inquiries. Republican Party Chairman Lee Atwater condemned the memo and said it was issued without his knowledge. President Bush called the memo disgusting, but said he believed Atwater was not behind it.
He looked me right in the eye and said he did not know about it.
Foley is saying, let's put it behind us and get on with our business. But a lot of other Democrats are saying Atwater should be fired.
When I was chairman of the Democratic Party, nothing like that could have conceivably gone out without my knowing about it. And I don't think anything goes out of offices without people knowing something about it of that magnitude.
In a time when vicious rumor and unfair innuendo increasingly are being used to gain political advantage, both Republican Dole and Democrat Strauss say enough is enough.
I think it's going to be have a sobering impact for a while.
I had a feeling that this town was rancid and that it needed scrubbing, and maybe we've finally thrown up, as you do from a poisoned food.
Gooden lost his job. It looks as if Atwater will get to keep his, but both Michael and Dole say, no more dirty tricks, boy.
From my point of view, if that ever happened again, you know, something of that caliber, distasteful as that was, then obviously you got to make another cut.
You know, you don't play that way. If you play that way, you don't play but once.
Maybe, unless you're part of a duet. Douglas Kiker, NBC News, Washington.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Now, 17-year-old Michael Chang of California said he never thought he would win the French Open tennis championship and only wanted to do his best. Well, today, he did his best, and he won the men's finals, the youngest man ever to do that. This is the way Dick Enberg of NBC Sports saw it.
Youth was served today in Paris. American tennis teenager Michael Chang defeated defending Wimbledon champion Stefan Edberg of Sweden to capture the French Open men's championship. An unlikely winner, this 17-year-old, 135-pound Southern Californian, whose experience on clay was meager, but a historic win it was. When Edberg netted a forehand to end the 5-set drama, Chang at 17 and a half became the youngest man ever to win this or any other Grand Slam event. The match was played in a wilting 90-degree temperatures for nearly 4 hours, all on the notorious red clay of Roland Garros, a slow, punishing surface that has consumed Americans since 1955, when Tony Trabert was the last American man to win in Paris. Like his win earlier in the tournament against Ivan Lendl, Chang rallied from behind, winning the final 2 sets today, thanking his family and blessing those who suffer in mainland China.
I'd just like to say God bless everybody, and especially those in China.
Michael Chang ends a 34-year drought for a U.S. player. The French Open is his in 5 sets over Stefan Edberg. One of those at center court in the 17,000 who saw Michael Chang make history today was his father, Joe, who was born in Canton, mainland China. Father Joe put this historic win by his son in perspective. He said, in this time where every Chinese language newspaper around the world carries the headline stories of the horror in Beijing, it'll be nice to know that for another day, the face of Michael Chang will be on the front page.
Dick Enberg of NBC Sports reporting from Paris. Another 17-year-old, Arantxa Sanchez, won the women's final in Paris yesterday. We'll have more news as we continue. Back to Beijing and Tom Brokaw.
No one knows for sure what kind of a life these youngsters will have in a China that is profoundly changed as a result of the Tiananmen Square massacre. But tonight we do have the story of one youngster who managed to get out of the country and the difficulty that involved. 3-year-old Eli Wang is a small boy in the middle of a big adventure. Eli was born in the United States when his Chinese parents went to the University of Washington. Eli's been living with his grandmother in Beijing while his parents continue their studies. And when trouble broke out here, his mother and father were desperate. First, they had to convince the grandmother, Hui Fentang, a retired professor, that it was dangerous to stay in China. She'd been getting all of her news from the state-controlled Chinese media and didn't fully appreciate what had been happening. Grandmother Tang had another problem. She had no visa for the United States, no money for an airplane ticket. But a Washington congressman and the American State Department were encouraging. So Eli and his grandmother headed for the Beijing airport, where a harried U.S. embassy official cut through a lot of red tape.
Well, we can try to do that tomorrow.
The American bureaucrat as hero.
All finished.
The next day, Grandmother Tang received her visa, and with Eli in tow, joined the exodus from her native country. Next stop, Tokyo's Narita Airport,
I'm so happy.
Eli's mother had flown in from Seattle for the reunion.
Oh, yeah, my mother. Mama.
Eli handled all of this with the studied calm of a world traveler. Tonight, Eli, grandmother Chang, Eli's parents, and his 5-year-old sister are reunited in Washington.
I don't know how to say it. Just so happy.
One story with a happy ending in a week with so much tragedy in China. And think about it. When Eli gets to be a grandfather, what a story he'll have for his grandchildren.
These boys are 8 and 11. Probably too young to really understand what happened in Beijing this spring. But in one way or another, it will have a lasting impact on the rest of their lives. Garrick?
Thank you, Tom. That is our report on this Sunday evening. Tom Brokaw will be reporting again tomorrow evening from Beijing, and I'll be here in New York. I'm Garrick Utley. Good night for NBC News.
You'll experience the movie the critics called gripping, mesmerizing, incredible from beginning to end. You'll see firsthand why they call Lindsay